What's happening, everybody? I'm Nolan Kelly here with Chris Randone. We are breaking down the Yahoo NFL DFS slate for week 8. Chris, what's going on, man? Thanks for joining us. Stepping in for Alex.
Yeah, man. No, I'm excited to be here. Excited to break down this 250K baller tournament on Yahoo. And yeah, man, I'm ready to get into it.
Nolan Kelly here. Nice. Yeah. You've been playing it all on Yahoo. It seems like it's one of my favorite spots to play every week so far. One of the first places I put my money. The competition is a lot less sharp. I find just digging everything Yahoo's got going on so far this year, man. How about yourself?
Yeah, no, I feel like Yahoo's definitely been relatively good to me, especially over the last couple of weeks. Last week, I had a nice little sweat with Ezekiel Elliott in the final game, but that lineup had Singletary. So had I had anyone else, like even Latavius Murray, man, I would have took down the baller. So I came in like 30th place, but not too bad.
Nice. That's awesome, man. Yeah, good for you. So normally what we do, Alex is just unable to make it today. Normally what we do is we talk about the 5 highest total games, and then we go in and we build some cash lineups and build some GPP lineups using Awesemo's rankings. We're not going to do that today. Today we're just going to talk. We're just going to defer to your expertise today. We're going to talk a little bit about this slate. Is there anyone just generally catching your eye? Some locks on this? Some Yahoo misprices that we need to get into our lineups early on?
Oh man, yeah. I think what we need to do is just, I think the price points are interesting. One of my favorite plays this week, and I think he's kind of going unowned. I think he also is in line to play because he did miss practice on Wednesday. But is D.D. Westbrook in the wide receiver position? He's $14. For me, he's coming really highly rated up on my projection model. He's had 28 targets over the last 3 weeks. Really has seemed to get back into the passing game a lot. And really, I kind of outperforming DJ Shark too as of late. So he's going up in the slot against a very weak New York Jets secondary where they struggle significantly against slot receivers. And, D.D. Westbrook, as we know, can really run the field as far as out of the slot position. Majority of his snaps come through the slot. So I'm really interested to see kind of where ownership stands on him. If he still stays sub 5% at $14 at wide receiver position, I really feel like that's definitely an upside play.
That's a good call there. Jacksonville going up against the Jets at home. He was like $10 last week, and 2 weeks ago, I know that you and Sal Vetru were on him big time. Disappointed there a little bit, but rebounded really big time last week. 9 targets, 6 receptions, 103 yards. I'm guessing he is going to be coming up pretty heavily in Awesemo's projections as well. So let's dive into some of these games here. Start out with the Seattle Seahawks at the Atlanta Falcons. We have an over-under of 53 so far in this game. We have Atlanta plus 7 points. It's looking like Matt Ryan is still questionable. I don't know if we have an update on that one. He was sidelined in Thursday's practice, so I would guess that he's going to be out, but who knows? Russell Wilson, the most expensive quarterback on the slate. For me, this is going to be a bit of a fade here, just because I think Russell Wilson priced up across the industry, most expensive on Yahoo at $40. If Matt Ryan can't go in this one, I don't see how Atlanta keeps this close in the slightest, and that's probably going to mean that Russell Wilson is either handing the ball off. The Seahawks are up big, and the fantasy value is not there. How are you approaching this game?
I mean, the way I look at it is, as we know, Atlanta's passing defense is relatively very soft, one of the worst in the league. And I know that you look at Russell Wilson's price point, it's somewhat kind of scary because he is $40 on Yahoo. But for me, he does have the highest ceiling, and that's important when it comes to situations of wanting high upside guys. And I'm not sure where the field is right now as far as are they willing to pay up that price point. But I think you mentioned a great point. If this game does get out of hand, and we see Matt Ryan also not take the field, a lot of love is going to go to Chris Carson. And here's one thing about Chris Carson is he is the workhorse as far as the running back for the Seattle Seahawks. A few weeks ago, people were kind of really saying that maybe if he has one more fumble or if he continues to slip, they're going to go ahead and pull him. Well, I think this should give you some kind of reassurance because last week, Rashard Penny didn't even touch the ball. Had no carries, no catches whatsoever. And so if you're looking for a running back who is priced at $27, I feel like he's appropriately priced. He's not in the best of matchups when it comes to as far as defensive statistics, but I think we can throw that out the window here because, as we've seen, the the entire defense of the Atlanta Falcons is just not good. And if the game script follows as planned and we see Seattle go into there really just manhandling them, we could see a lot of love for Chris Carson here outside of already the amount of production that he already gets. So I think, don't focus on anything else besides the fact that he's going to get the volume. And at $27, I think you can go ahead and go that way.
I like that. I like that call. It's also a nice pivot if you don't want to game stack this one, or if you want to get away from a high total game and maybe hope that the touchdowns go the way of the running back. He had 5 targets last week. He's getting about anywhere between 3 to 5 targets. We've seen in past years that the Atlanta Falcons are essentially a flow chart in terms of passing to running backs. Hasn't been as pronounced this year, but I still think they're going to be weak in terms of allowing targets to opposing running backs. $27 does seem like a reasonable price. We have him as a B for points and a C for value, but I've got no problem loading him up there. What about if you're going to Russell Wilson? Are you pairing him up with perennially cheap on Yahoo, Tyler Lockett, $26, DK Metcalf? Any of these guys catching your eye? This seems like a little bit more of a concentrated offense in Seattle these days.
So early on in the season, we saw Tyler Lockett get a significant amount of targets. But as we've seen as of late, that the targets aren't necessarily there, although he is still producing. And it's one thing to really take into consideration that we can't be necessarily scared that the targets have dropped down. The first 3 games, he had 28 targets. And then since then, he's had 20 targets through 4 games. So it's dropped. But however, though, 5 receptions last week, a touchdown against the Baltimore Ravens defense that does struggle against the slot. Here, I think you also have to put in to really take note that Atlanta's Falcons defense is just not that great when it comes to the passing game. And I think that both Lockett and Metcalf can be in play. We have Lockett at $26, which I think that, if you're looking to pay up a wide receiver, I think that's fine. But I do love the pivot to Metcalf. I think this week people will be less on Metcalf compared to Lockett. And I do think that there's upside there. He got 9 targets last week, only 4 catches over 53 yards. But he is that deep threat. He is that guy that can torch that Atlanta secondary. So if you're also rostering Wilson, I think the guy to pair him up with would be DK Metcalf in this situation.
I like it. I like that call. That's going to be a contrarian play as well, probably with him just $6 less than Tyler Lockett. Let me throw something at you. Let's just say Matt Schaub starts $20. I think that's the cheapest price you can get for a quarterback on Yahoo. Any interest? Any interest in stacking this game up if he starts and then bringing it back with some Seattle players, or are you just off it completely?
I don't really have interest in Matt Schaub. At that point, I'm just, throwing something and hoping that it sticks. For me, when it comes to the Atlanta offense, I kind of want to stay away this game. I think what we're going to see out of a Seattle defense is put a lot of pressure on Matt Schaub, which I think will make him very uncomfortable. And I think that, there's not enough chemistry there, nor is there enough time for him to kind of have that type of chemistry with the wideouts. So for me personally, the only person I would want from the Atlanta side would be Austin Hooper. I think Austin Hooper is a great play at tight end. And I think this will be a security blanket for Schaub if he does start. I could see a lot of checkdowns. I could see a lot of 8-9 yard passes to Hooper. And I mean, Hooper's someone who, up until last week, was really shut down until Matt Schaub came in, believe it or not. So I think I think Manny said it on our show earlier. He had no catches until Matt Schaub came in, and then he actually scored a touchdown, had 4 catches, 46 yards. So, for me personally, he is the highest priced tight end, but he could be someone that a backup quarterback does utilize in a lot of instances, as we see the case in the NFL.
I like it. I like that call. All right, let's move it on. We got a much less exciting game here for the second one on our slate. Philadelphia Eagles at the Buffalo Bills. Over under is 43. Buffalo favored by 1.5 points. I don't like much in this game, but I do like that Zach Ertz price point at $17 on Yahoo. He is getting an A for points and a B for value in Awesemo's rankings this week. As well, the Philadelphia Eagles defense, not too shabbily ranked. Everything else in this game is looking terrible. Do you have any interest? Is John Brown maybe popping against this horrible Eagles secondary? What are your thoughts on this one?
I really liked John Brown last week. I thought he was in a great spot against the Miami Dolphins, and I spoke highly of him. And he did produce, 6 targets, 5 catches, 83 yards, and a touchdown. This week he's $23. Last week he was 20. He's going up against another bad secondary in the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't know how I feel when it comes to this game because I I like other areas at $23 at wide receiver, and I feel like there are other areas that provide much more upside and better game situations for either high scoring or for shootouts. This game doesn't necessarily appeal me as much, and so I like the defense as far as the Bills are concerned. But when it comes to the offense, I think some shares of John Brown is fine, but I'll probably come in under the field when it comes to John Brown at wideout.
What about Zach Ertz, $17?
I mean, Zach Hertz has had a horrific year for fantasy purposes. I mean, I drafted him in a lot of my season-long fantasy leagues. I thought there was a lot of upside there, especially with a healthy Carson Wentz. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he's scored 1 touchdown all year. And, I mean, he hasn't had 100 yards yet this entire season. I mean, barely averaging 4 or 5 receptions a game. But, I mean, the yards per game are in the 50s. And, without scoring, what kind of upside does that bring? To the tight end spot, especially at $17. So when you're looking at tight end, I think there's other areas where, hey, I can pay up a little bit more and get Kelce in the Sunday night matchup against Green Bay. I think TJ Hawkinson's an interesting play at $12. And then, I mean, there's other areas too where maybe you can go to Jared Cook for the Saints in a great matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. So, for me and looking at this, at $17, yeah, it could probably be contrarian. I don't know if a lot of people will be on him, but he just hasn't produced at a level to give me confidence to want to roster him.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it is a bargain spot, so it's really just going to come down to ownership for me as well. We've seen, this Bears secondary is unbelievable. The Bears pass defense, anyways. The only way that the only slight weakness in their defense is their defense against the tight end position. They're in top 5 in defending wide receiver 1s, wide receiver 2, and wide receivers 3. Though I do. Their weakness is also against the running back here too. But I think at that price point, he's the kind of guy that you'll just pop in some game stacks if you have the cash and you need a tight end, because it's still Zach Ertz. It's such a great bargain. So I disagree with you there a little bit, but I agree that he's probably not a core play in a very low total game, especially as you mentioned, Jared Cook going up against the flow chart Arizona Cardinals, allowing 7 more fantasy points per game to the position than the second closest team. So very good spot for him there. All right, let's move it on. We got the LA Chargers. I actually said LA instead of San Diego. So LA Chargers up against the Chicago Bears. Chicago minus 3.5. Another low total game here, 41 points. Any general thoughts on this one?
I mean, wow, how bad are the Chicago Bears in their offense? I mean, it's just absolutely horrible. They have no identity. I've mentioned this a couple times now. No established running game. And poor Allen Robinson, so talented, great wideout, and just hasn't been paired with a wide receiver, paired with a great quarterback yet since he's been in the NFL. And you're looking at a team here that just really they look clueless, even on both sides of the ball. Right now, they're struggling against the run. A lot of people have spoke highly of this defense, but the last 2 weeks, we've seen Josh Jacobs torch them, and then we've seen a Latavius Murray run all over them. So if you're looking at this game, nothing from the Chicago side as far as offense outside of maybe a few shares of Allen Robinson. I think where you want to look at maybe is, what is this San Diego Chargers offense going to do? Because they're very confusing since the resurgence of Melvin Gordon, which hasn't been great to say the least. He fumbled last week on the goal line to win the game. Hasn't really produced yet at a high level. Eckler has been given the back seat essentially, but in the times that he is on the field and the role that he's playing, he's still producing. They need to really hopefully see that and get him on the field more, because I think he's in a great spot here. Against the Bears, I think when you see a defense that's struggling against the run, you want to be able to exploit that until they make changes, and I don't think they're going to make changes in this short period of time. So I think Eckler is somewhat interesting, and if Keenan Allen's out, I think Mike Williams becomes definitely a great value play. I think on Yahoo, if I'm not mistaken, he's $15. I mean, at that point, you're paying $15 for a number 1 wideout. I'm throwing the defensive approach out the window here and going with plays that, hey, if the defense is struggling, hit the iron while it's hot.
Oh, I like it. Yeah, that Chicago Bears struggling against the run. It's just like catching. If you were sharp and you kind of got ahead of it last week, I feel like it was Latavius Murray, so everyone was on him. But it's kind of caught people by surprise because they were so good last year. They're also giving up the second most targets to running back this year, the 5th most yards, the 4th most receptions. and the sixth most points to opposing running backs. So I like Eckler in this spot a lot. He is get graded out as a B for points and a B for value, $19 on Yahoo. We also see him on the field with Melvin Gordon a lot. They're just using him all over the place. I think 3 games ago he had something like 15 or 16 targets. It was just nuts. So I don't think those two are mutually exclusive. And if they are going to use Eckler in the passing game so much against the team that's having trouble defending pass catching running backs, that's a nice spot there at a decent price. Where are we at here? Mike Williams, $15. That's a nice. That's one of those contrarian plays I think you can put in some of your chalkier stacks, right? Like he's always got the option of his targets are up over the last month, 7, 13, 10, 6. He's always a threat to break one off, huge red zone target. So Mike Williams, I like the call there a lot because you're probably going to get him at very low ownership, especially if this total stays low and people just aren't going to be on them. So good call there. Any love for Mitch Trubisky at $20? Any side of any of these Bears catching your eye other than Allen Robinson?
Nah, I don't think any of these Bears provide any upside outside of Allen Robinson, and that's just because of the amount of targets he gets. I mean, last week he got 16 targets, 10 catches, 87 yards, late touchdown in garbage time, but still, I mean, he's been pretty consistent. And for me, I think outside of that, PBR purposes, I just don't see any value in rostering any other type of Chicago Bear.
Yeah, good point there. And his targets, he's been so consistent this year. His lowest yard total is 40 yards when that was September 15th against the Broncos, but I think he left that game. So three receiving TDs, anywhere between 7 and 10 receptions, and 7 to 16 targets. So really safe play for cash games as well. I like that call a lot. All right, let's move it on. We got the New York Giants at the Detroit Lions. We're seeing some line movement with this one. Initially, the Lions were favored by 7.5. That's been pushed all the way down to 6.5. I would have loved to have bet the other side of that one, but here we are, 49.5 total. The Giants are getting a little bit healthy. Kerryon Johnson is out, so we have a spot where Ty Johnson is priced down to $13 on Yahoo, getting to be near lock territory, I think, at that price. Give me your general thoughts on this one, Chris.
Yeah, so last week we saw the Lions passing game. Matt Stafford throwing for the highest yardage of the year so far, and Marvin Jones scoring 4 touchdowns. And I was big on this game. I really thought that there was a lot of shootout potential there. I thought that also the Lions would have to pass a lot and play from behind, and we saw Marvin Jones from the slot really kind of erupt. And this week is no different. I mean, a completely different story as far as the matchup per se when it comes to the defensive unit in the passing game or the passing defense of the Giants. Very weak, very young, very inexperienced. They're all getting torched. Grant Haley, DeAndre Baker, the two combined over 500 yards, 3 touchdowns against wideouts so far this year. And then Michael Thomas and Antoine Bethea have a combined passer rating of 140.3, I believe, with quarterbacks throwing against them. And, for them, they're just getting torched on the deep ball. And so you're looking at a team now that definitely loves to throw the ball. And for me here, I really love Kenny Galladay. I feel like this is a little bit of a bounce back game for him. Last week, owners or people who rostered him were kind of upset. I mean, when you see Matt Stafford throw for that many yards and Galladay only have 1 reception for 21 yards, it's very tilting. But I think, you got to go back to your nice playmaker this week. I think he's going to get a lot of looks. I feel like there's going to be a lot of open opportunities in that coverage. And I think Matt Stafford has a great opportunity to pick this defense apart. But don't get me wrong, I think Marvin Jones is in a great spot too in the slot. I think for him, he'll be paired up with either Haley or Baker, opposing each other. So I think for him, this is a great matchup as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see another big game from Marvin Jones either. So either one of these guys, and I think we can even talk about Matthew Stafford even being in play. He's $32, but he definitely has a high ceiling. I think there's a lot of upside there. We love to target against the Giants secondary. There's a lot of vulnerability there, a lot of weakness, and I don't mind it.
Yeah, some great points in there. Matthew Stafford is second in the NFL, minimum of 50% attempts in deep passing. He has the second highest percentage So the Lions, I don't know what's going on in that Bevel offense. It used to be he was known for being one of the most run heavy OCs in the league in Seattle, and now he's running the most deep pass heavy offense. I like that call, Kenny Golladay call a lot. I think he's priced up to the point where people are going to avoid him, and there's some recency bias there that people are also going to be off him. We've been picking on the Giants all year this year. Their cornerbacks, DeAndre Baker and help me out, Janoris Jenkins. They've been terrible. Both of them rank in the the bottom 5 in yards per snap allowed this season. So good spot. The only issue I have with the Lions here is that they are priced up a little bit. It's not cheap. You got Stafford at $32. You got Jones. Jones is still a bargain at 18, I think, but Golladay at 25. It's not cheap to get these guys in a stack. Let's talk a little bit about the running games here, because we have Saquon Barkley in a really plush spot despite the game script, despite the line. The Lions are giving up the second most fantasy points to opposing running backs so far this season. DVOA wise, they are also pretty bad. Are you in on Saquon, or is this $41 price tag just too much?
I mean, it is kind of too much. I mean, in cash, I would say that it's fine, but in GBPs, I mean, I don't know, because then it takes away from other areas that you want to go to. And for Saquon, he hasn't really given us enough to justify that 41 price point. I mean, for me, 15 points last week scored against the Arizona Cardinals is not going to do justice at $41. And so for me, the way I look at it, I think he's hit value twice this year while he's been on the field and not injured. And I just don't know how I feel about paying $41 so much in GBPs. Maybe I'll have some exposure. I'm still trying to figure this out. I do think you're right. It's the great spot. They give up the 4th most fantasy points to running backs, especially over the last 4 or 5 weeks, Detroit Lions. So I do love that. I don't know if I love the passing game from the Giants. If anything, I'm going to roster the running game. And so the one thing I would want to see is can they get Saquon involved more in the passing game as far as deeper plays? Last week he had 5 targets for 3 catches, only 8 yards. Last year we saw Saquon, a lot of yards per reception. We saw a lot of more plays in the backfield for him as far as screens, little checkdowns. I would love to see that more from Daniel Jones and him. And then also his attempts. Would love to start seeing maybe a little bit more attempts. 18 last week, pretty solid. His highest so far, I think, tied this year. I think he also had 18 against the Bills. But I would love to see him start getting in the 20s. And I would also like to see him start getting some more red zone carries as well. So if things can change, I mean, it definitely justifies the $41 price tag. But I'm not saying don't play him. I think it's a great play. I just don't know how much exposure I want to have to him yet. I think I'll figure that out over the next 2 days.
Yeah, fair enough. It just gets really hard to fit these guys in on Yahoo when you have a guy priced that highly, and especially when you can get down and they're usually like a couple guys that are mispriced or that are just such great values. So I guess it does depend on the roster construction, but at that price, it's really hard to consider him a lock this week. Final thoughts on this game. Are you going to be pressing that lock button on Ty Johnson, or are you out on it? Somewhere in between.
A lot of people are seeming to press that lock button at $13. We saw what Chase Edmunds did, a backup running back to this defensive unit this past week. And so I wouldn't be surprised if this guy, Todd Johnson, comes in and does the same. It's a great bargain. A lot of upside there potentially. And yeah, I don't mind it. $13 is fairly cheap. And it can definitely open up a lot of salary cap to other areas in roster construction. So don't hate it. Just need to figure a little bit more about this guy.
All right. I like it. Moving it on, New York Jets at the Jacksonville Jaguars. A low total game again. We got a lot of low total games here in the low 40s. New York Jets at Jacksonville. Jacksonville favored by 6.5. The Jets looked absolutely terrible last week against the Patriots. You like D.D. Westbrook here a little bit. Talk a little bit about this game. What are you seeing besides D.D.? Anything else catching your eye?
Yeah, the thing is interesting because I think Gardner Minshew is somewhat interesting at $26. For me, he's exceeded his projected point total 71% so far this year, and he's a dual threat guy. Out of these 6 games or 7 games that the 6 games that he started, I mean, he's ran for over 40 yards in 3 of them. So it's always nice to get that dual threat, and that ranks 6th amongst quarterbacks as far as rushing. And then, for me, he's throwing a lot. The thing is that there's been drops. He hasn't been as accurate, so that's what's been really holding me back as far as wanting to roster him more. But I think when you look at the matchup, he could have really took advantage of the Cincinnati Bengals last week more than what he actually did. He scored 21 fantasy points on Yahoo last week against them, but there were a lot of drop passes in the end zone. There were a lot of unfortunate penalties as well that brought back big plays. And if you really take that into consideration, it would really change the projected total for him as far as what he had last week. Going into this week, he's facing a very weak Jets secondary. As we saw, Tom Brady didn't need to do much against them because they really got them on the running ground. But they have been torched by slot wide receivers. And for me, looking at Dede Westbrook at $14, if he does play and he's healthy, based on the target shares that we've seen from him, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think he's going to be able to exploit that defensive coverage, and I think it's a great situation for him. As we know Leonard Fournette's going to get his volume, and I think probably it's safe to say that he's a must play because of the volume that he gets. Last 2 weeks have been somewhat disappointing in some essence because he didn't really go over the top of what we saw, but he did salvage himself in some ways. But Dede Westbrook, he's running 298 plays out of the slot so far this year. Should be paired up with Nate Hairston or Darrell Roberts. Both of them combined over 500 yards of throwing against them, 4 touchdowns. I think it's a great situation. DJ Shark is always also in play, I guess, for a deep threat. But right now, I think what we've seen Minshew and Westbrook over the last few weeks as well really get in sync with one another. So I think this is an area I want to attack as far as the passing game.
Nice. I like it. For the first time all year, we actually have Leonard Fournette, I think, in a non-lock spot on Yahoo. Alex and I have been doing this show for 7 weeks now, and I think every single week we've had him as one of our cash game picks because he's been so underpriced on Yahoo, somewhere in between the like $20 to $28 range. So now he finally gets a slightly tougher matchup than he has in the past, and he's actually priced up as well. We have Le'Veon Bell, two of the 3 biggest bell cow backs in the entire NFL this season. Are you getting to either of these guys at their price points? They're priced a little up. They don't seem to be great values. Low total game. Does the usage trump their price points in the total, or are you just kind of sprinkling these guys in whenever it fits?
I think I'm kind of just sprinkling them in.
Yeah.
Fair. Yeah.
All right. Let's move it on to the next game. Before we do, let's just talk a little bit about Yahoo. If you haven't played on Yahoo yet, you can head on over to Awesemo.com. EMAC writes a weekly article called The $1 Million Baller, which he goes over all of his favorite picks for Yahoo. And from that article, you can get a link there to sign up for Yahoo. You can get $30 in YSRP rewards points if you use promo code Awesemo. It's a great deal. This week's $1 Million Baller is 150 max. There are 27,800 entries, and top prize is 10% management free, which is a lot lower than a lot of the other places out there. So that's one of the great advantages of Yahoo as well. 6,000 places paid. So make sure to go check that out and start playing on Yahoo because it's really good. They also got some great NBA and NHL contests too. So all right, let's move it on. We got we're about halfway through the slate here, about halfway through the show. We got the Cincinnati Bengals heading. Oh no, this is a London game, right? Weird time London game. It is at 1:00 Eastern time. Over under 47 points. The Rams favored by 12.5 here. What's your general takeaways from this one?
I mean, Cincinnati's worst rush defense in the league, one of the worst defenses in itself in the league. We saw Andy Dalton last week, just was absolutely horrible. He had 3 interceptions in 4 straight passes, which really just shows that he doesn't have a good lack of presence on the field right now. He's not reading defenses good. His wide receivers are also dropping passes. Tyler Boyd has been very disappointing over the last few weeks. We saw a wideout really the first few weeks catch our eyes and really was a must play based on the amount of volume that he was getting, right? 14 targets, 11 targets. And then, for us, it's something where when you see the targets, it's great. But if you're not seeing the production, what good is it, right? He's had 3 red zone targets all season so far, only 1 touchdown. He's just not, for his price point, he's dropped now to $17, right? He's in the low 20s the last few weeks. But for me, the way I look at it is I think AJ Bouye might be on him a lot, and this will be a very tough matchup for him if that's the case. And so I don't really like anyone from the Bengals side of the ball. I think I really want to focus on this Rams offense. The thing I like the most is I want to roster Gurley, right? Gurley is someone that we don't really know. Is he not the same, or is it because the offensive line is the worst rated offensive line according to PFF this season? They're just absolutely horrible. And if you watch this team, the way they run the ball, he is getting stopped in the backfield a majority of the times. I mean, this front line cannot hold anything at the line of scrimmage, and so it's really taken away from his opportunity to hit holes, to really bust one out, to see that old Gurley that we love to see. But he's $27, and I think this is a must-win game for them. I think, for us, we saw 18 attempts last week, his highest total of the season so far. He was also there late in the game, which is somewhat, I guess, positive to take notice. He had one touchdown. He had a touchdown catch. It was his only target of the game. So I kind of salvaged whatever he was doing. I mean, it still wasn't even a great game from him. But is the field going to go with Gurley in this matchup? It seems like it would be a must play, right? Worst defensive rushing team in the league. And a lot of talent there in Gurley. So I really want to roster him. And then obviously the passing game is obviously a must, right? Every single wide receiver I feel like is in play. I think Goff's in play. I think this is a great spot for the Rams in itself as a collective unit offensively. And I don't think you can go wrong rostering anyone.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. Great points about the LA Rams and their offensive line this year. They were the #1 ranked run blocking unit in the entire NFL, according to PFF last year, 77 total grade. This year, they are 28th in the NFL, 50 total grade. The interior of their offensive line's in shambles. They lost Saffold. So I'm on team running backs don't matter, and I think that offensive lines dictate a huge percentage of the success of a run game. And so until we start to see some signs of this Rams offensive line of old, I'm going to be a little bit worrisome about targeting Gurley as well. He had a 60% snap share last week. Henderson had a 34% snap share. So there is some split workload here. It's not like Gurley is the bell cow back I think that we're used to seeing. Osimo has him as a B for points and a C for value in his ranking. So I think that, this is a great spot, right? The Cincinnati defense has been torched by opposing running backs this year. They're ranked 28th in DVOA. But to your point, you can attack the Bengals a lot of different ways here. And I think that your call on just going for the passing game as well is equally valid. 28th in DVOA against #1 wide receivers, 30th in DVOA against #2 wide receivers. So you can attack this Bengals team a number of different ways. It's going to be curious to see what the ownership ends up like. If you do go to this Rams passing attack, are you bringing it back with anyone? Do you like Alex Erickson, who finally had his breakout game? We have him as a pretty good value here. Any other thoughts on the Cincinnati side of this one?
Yeah, I think Alex Harrison could be in play at $13, especially if you're expecting a blowout here and the Bengals are going to play from behind, which I think they will. I don't think this will be a competitive game, to be quite honest with you. I think LA is going to show out there in London. I think we'll see a lot of offensive fireworks from the Rams side. And yeah, so I think Alex Erickson is in play. I think Tate can be in play too at $13. The thing with Tate, as we've seen over the last few weeks, is he's produced to some extent 6 targets, 11 targets, 6 targets, scored a touchdown. Getting some red zone looks. So I don't mind it because I think, they're going to play from behind. But I'll tell you what, this defense is different now from the Rams. Before the Jalen Ramsey acquisition, they're playing a little bit more soft, a little off man coverage, a little bit more zone. And now what we're seeing now, especially this last game against the Falcons, is they played tight up front, a lot of blitz packages, a lot of pressure because they played a lot of man-to-man coverage. And they played a lot of man-to-man coverage because they had a lot more confidence with Jalen Ramsey in that type of role. So look to that. Look for that type of approach moving forward from this defense. And I think that changes the whole dynamic of offensive game plans against them, which is going to be relatively tough. If you're putting a lot of pressure on Andy Dalton, I think there's going to be a lot of turnovers there or a lot of opportunities for turnovers. And I think that makes this Rams defense a great play this week.
I like that call. I think that if you are game stacking and you do want to go back, though, I don't really hate any of these Bengals options at their current price points as well. Cincinnati running a lot of 11 personnel. There are Tyler Boyd, Erickson, and Tate are getting a huge amount of snaps so far. So I think you can go to any one of those guys if you are bringing it back in your game stacks. All right, let's move it on up. We probably got to speed up here. I'm taking too long with these games. So Arizona Cardinals at the New Orleans Saints, 48 total. New Orleans favored by 10.5. We still don't know about Kamara. He was limited in Thursday's practice. I haven't gotten the Friday practice reports yet. Someone was saying in chat that Matt Ryan is in, so we'll have to see about Kamara. I don't know if you have an update for me. Looks like David Johnson's going to be in a similar situation to the one he was in last week. Chase Edmunds just $16. If we're looking at possibly Johnson on a snap count, Chase Edmunds got to be a lock, right? And just give me your general thoughts on this one as well as these running back situations. whether or not you'd like one of these Latavius Murray at 18, Chase Edmunds at 16. So many things to consider in this game. Hey.
Yeah, I mean, Alvin Kamara was upgraded to limited practice. So, I mean, he's doing limited drills. So, I guess that's one thing to take note. But, I mean, let's talk about this game because, the Cardinals have been somewhat disappointing, especially Larry Fitzgerald, this passing game that has been really hyped up the last few weeks. A lot of great matchups. Just really hasn't came through. I don't think Kyler Murray is exactly the quarterback that a lot of people anticipated. I think there's a lot of growth there that needs to take place. I think he also needs to just have a little bit more experience under his belt and really get adjusted to the fastness of the NFL and the defenders compared to college. But for me in this game, I think I'm all Saints. I think I'm Michael Thomas heavy. I think Bridgewater is okay. I think there's a lot of areas to exploit in this Atlanta secondary. And also, I think if Cook, we're looking at Jared Cook right now. He's limited in practice or didn't practice. So that could be interesting because then we could see a lot more Josh Hill. I think Josh Hill would be a great value play too at the tight end position. As we know, Cardinals are necessarily one of the worst defenses against the tight end position this year. So I don't mind that either. But as far as the Cardinal side of the ball, I think this is a game that we see the Saints defense once again just be very stout against the run and against the pass. I don't see the Cardinals making a game of this. If anything, if you want to roster a wideout because you think they'll play from behind, that's okay. But I think the best play in this matchup is probably Thomas. I would be a little bit cautious with Kamara and how much snaps he gets if he does play and how long he's on the field. And that could mean that Latavius Murray does seem a little bit, or does see a little bit more of a workload than usual if he is the second back. But outside of that, man, I don't think I'm going anywhere else.
Yeah, good points there. I think, this game has a lot of moving parts. Obviously, it's going to come down to a lot of different injuries, and we probably aren't going to know until Sunday if everyone's active. You might want to use this as a place to kind of pivot, to adjust your lineups on the fly. This is one of the early lock games, so at least you'll have that information. And then depending on how ownership shakes down, we saw a couple of weeks ago with Ship My Money winning that 100K tournament, he was just putting Chris Godwin in because his analysis was that they wouldn't play Godwin if he wasn't healthy. And of course, you get a huge ownership discount with that as well. So this is going to be a game, I think, to keep an eye on as the week progresses and see what's going on with all these injuries. Like that Michael Thomas call as well. We know what the Arizona Cardinals are like pace wise. Hopefully that matchup with Patrick Peterson scares off some DFSers as well. So I like a lot of options in this game, but it's kind of one of these ones where it's a little too early in the week to figure out which way we're going. Let's move on. Tampa Bay, Tennessee, 46 total. Tennessee -2.5. We have possibly the greatest pass funnel option in the entire NFL this week or this year. I mean, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, stout run defense, terrible pass defense. What do you like? What are you liking in this one? Are any of these bargain basement options in the Tennessee passing game catching your eye? Because if they're super low on in some of these tournaments, I might be going to some Tannehill, Corey Davis, AJ Brown stacks.
Oh man, for me in this game, I don't really like too much. I did speak on Henry. I think he's a great value play for Yahoo. I believe he is $18 on Yahoo, and for me, he projects very well as far as his rating and his ceiling. Tampa Bay does have a great rush defense, but I'm gonna go against that narrative because I'm looking at what we've seen lately with good rush defenses and been getting torched. I think the NFL changes on a week-to-week basis. And I think Tennessee at home in a matchup where I think they're going to have to run the ball more than they pass. I think Henry, he's going to get his workload. He's going to get his 19, 20 carries. I think he'll get his goal line carries as well. And for me at $18, I think that'll pay off. Passing side from both sides, I'm just not really intrigued by this game. Like nothing really stands out to me. I feel like there's just so many other areas I want to attack. And that could be a bad thing for me. But for me, Chris Godwin's $31. Mike Evans, $29. I don't know if I want to go that route. I guess you can look at Corey Davis. He's 14. Another guy who's interesting, who's on the field a lot as well, is Tajay Sharp. He seems to be the third guy on the field as far as wideouts for Tennessee. Saw him got into the end zone last week. He's $10. He's min price, but they seem to do a three-man rotation with Sharp, Corey Davis, and who's the why am I forgetting the other guy? AJ Brown. Those three guys, they run a three-man rotation. They're primarily on the field the entire time. But yeah, I mean, for me, I just don't like this game, Nolan. I don't know if there's anything that really stands out to me much. And once again, I guess I'll have 2 days to really figure that out more. But Jameis Winston, man, I mean, he had 6 turnovers last game. I mean, for me, I don't want to have to deal with that. I mean, he threw for 400 yards, but he had 6 turnovers. So I just, once again, probably over the next 2 games that we speak about, I'm probably gonna have a little bit more input because there's a lot more fantasy fireworks there.
Yeah, that's fair enough, man. I think that's a totally fair take. I really like your call there on the Tampa Bay run defense as well, just because we've seen so far really that volume trumps matchup, and that these 1 week a team can look great on defense and run defense, and the next week they look terrible. Derrick Henry, really good price point as well this week. Just I think he's $18 on Yahoo. That's probably going to be a really strong play for cash games as well at that price point with his workload. And then if you want a sneaky play, it looks like OJ Howard has been ruled out. Cameron Brate, $12. That this Tennessee secondary is pretty good, but they are pretty bad against the tight end, or they have been so far, at least in DVOA this week. So I do like. I think your points are all valid ones, and I think this is probably going to be a game that if you stay away from, it's not going to hurt you too badly. But the price points on the Tennessee options do allow you to pay up in other spots, and I'm going to have some Tennessee stacks this week, and I'm going to look like an idiot after they put 17 points on the board. So all right, let's move it on. Denver Broncos at the Indianapolis Colts, 42 points. Indy -5. Anything sticking out to you about this one?
Ooh, I like the Colts D here. I think the Colts D can be in a somewhat good spot. You have to keep in mind they've been fairly good defensively to some extent in some great matchups. I mean, if you look at what they did against the Chiefs, I thought that was interesting. But I think here, what I talked about earlier on the show with Manny was I really like Marlon Mack here, and I say that because the Denver Broncos defense is good when it comes to the passing game. They just gave up their first touchdown, or they gave up first touchdown to the cornerback position last week. And for me, looking at this, I don't know if Indianapolis can get it done with the passing game, and they're very stout defensively when it comes to pass defense, the Broncos, and as they are also a little bit when it comes to running game. But what we've seen this year, at least from the running game, is there have been multiple games where there's been some weakness there. And for me, Marlon Mack, he's a workhorse, right? And in order to win this game, I really feel like they're going to have to do a lot of game management, a lot of ground and pound, move the chains, and I feel like this game script fits Marlon Mack fairly well. I don't see Joe Flacco doing anything. He looks absolutely horrible this year. He looks lost, confused, horrible pocket presence, looks very uncomfortable, and he can't read defenses. He just can't. And so I don't see Denver going up in this game. If anything, I see Indianapolis just controlling the clock, moving the chains, just trying to get out of this game as much as they can. And I think that suits Marlon Mack heavily. And I think for me, this is something where not a lot of people will be on him, but I feel like this game fits him good. And for me, at $25, I mean, I'm willing to give that a shot.
I'll tell you what, man, I like that call. Mac was not on my radar at all heading into this one, but it makes a lot of sense. And it's really the only reason he hasn't been on my radar is really just because he hasn't done much recently. So that's he did have that big game against Kansas City, but really 5 of his last 6, he's been under 75 yards. So this is a great spot for him. And I agree with your call on the defense there. And so does Osimo. We have the Indianapolis Colts at $12. A for points, a B for value. That's one of the best defensive grades on the entire slate. I also like T.Y. Hilton a little bit at this price point, $23. Not a great value according to Osimo's rankings, but still Denver's been really bad against opposing number ones this season as well. So some solid stuff here. And I think that if you're going in GPPs, the Colts defense is probably going to be pretty heavily owned this week. So just make sure to pivot off of them if you've got some other options, because we've seen before defense is pretty variable. So, all right, let's move it on. We're into the afternoon games here. We got Carolina Panthers at the San Francisco 49ers, 42.5. San Francisco favored by 5.5. Carolina coming off the bye. What are you seeing here, Chris?
I mean, I'm seeing a 49ers defense that I definitely believe in. That's for one. This will be a great test this week for McCaffrey. McCaffrey, as we know, he's always like a no-brainer, right? Just so much volume, so much upside, both in the running and passing game, on the field almost every single play. And I mean, he shreds opposing defenses week to week. And he has 9 touchdowns through 6 games. So it's really hard to fade him in any aspect. I love him, right? The only thing I'm worried about is that the 49ers have been just manhandling their opponents on the ground and through the air. And so I'm worried about Kyle Allen turning over the ball. And to be honest with you, I'm also worried about 49ers defense just really having a structured game plan for McCaffrey. and just really forcing Kyle Allen to throw. But once again, it's all this is all just preliminary. I'm just curious over the next 2 days how I feel even more, and I want to roster McCaffrey as much as I can, but I also am just trying to figure out kind of will he have that much upside against them. So we saw the Bucks limit McCaffrey on the running game twice this year, right? Strong, stout rush defense, 37 yards one game, 31 yards the other game. The thing where he got him for a touchdown reception and a rushing touchdown, which kind of salvaged his overall fantasy performance. So I guess the real question is if we saw this twice now with a good defense stop him in a sense or have a good game plan, does that happen this week? And so I'm curious to see where the field goes with ownership. If he comes in low, I think I want to buy more shares of him as far as maybe if it's under, let's just say, I don't know, 25%, right? Right now he's at 24.8%. Earlier he was a little bit higher. So if he can, maybe let's just say he continues to drop a little bit, I think this would be a time where maybe we can buy a little bit more into McCaffrey. So very interesting. It's definitely a tough matchup. I will say this on the other side of the ball, don't roster Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo is he's a great quarterback, right? Real game quarterback, great game manager, great guy at just controlling the clock, being able to read defenses to know how to audible to a run, right? This is a run-heavy team, though. They're running back by committee in a three-way fashion with Jeff Wilson, Tevin Coleman, and Matt Breida. These guys, their identity is to run, and then we're going to go ahead and throw when we can because they don't have weapons to throw to outside of George Kittle. And while he does make the passing game easier, but outside of that, though, he's not doing more than what we would like to see out of him. And I think it's because of how they just approach the running game. But also keep in mind, Carolina, they've only allowed 2 touchdowns to tight ends this season. So it's not like he's the most optimal play this week. I think you can go to other areas for tight end. I think here, this game, really tough to kind of figure out. This over-under right now where it stands is 42.5. And so I don't know how I feel. Got a couple days to really figure this out, guys. But what I would say right now is keep an eye on this ownership of McCaffrey. And the San Francisco 49ers offense, man, is not the offense that you kind of want to look for when it comes to GBP play.
Yeah, this is as tough as a matchup as you're going to find for McCaffrey. It's almost like there's one of the rare spots where he's not an auto lock. And I think your point stands. This is a pay up to be contrarian spot depending on how the ownership shakes down. I got a feeling people are going to be scared off of that price tag. They're going to see the 49ers as the the first or second best fantasy run defense so far this year. So he's still Christian McCaffrey. You could still break it off for 100 yards receiving and 7 receptions or whatever line he could put up. But great points. I feel like this is a really tough game to analyze as well. And I'm kind of leaning towards fading it for the most part, just because the pace is slow. Both these teams want to run the ball, and both these defenses and secondaries are really good. So, all right, let's move it on. We got 3 games left in about 5 minutes, so we will hustle through these ones. Oakland Raiders at the Houston Texans, 51.5. Houston -7. Some news on the wide receiver front. Will Fuller is doubtful. I can't imagine he will be playing. Terrell Williams is questionable. I don't have a Friday update, but he is expected to return to this week. On the Oakland side, Darren Waller is finally priced up a little bit. He's been so cheap. I think it was $18 or something last week. So he's been just amazing this year. Total revelation. Are you getting much of this game? Pretty high total here, though the price points are also pretty high.
Yeah, I'll make this quick. A lot of weapons here. I think Darren Waller is absolutely in play. I mean, this guy is a hybrid. He is a tight end, wide receiver type of player. Big target, tremendous speed. I think what we saw last week, in previous weeks too, this Houston Texans defense struggles in the secondary. We saw Jacoby Brissett throw for 326 yards and 4 touchdowns in week 7. And I think that this will kind of show some upside for the passing game as far as Waller is concerned. Houston Texans, I think that this is going to be an outstanding game for them. I think Watson is an amazing play. I think Hopkins and Stills are definitely in play as well. I mean, there's just no doubt that this is going to be very interesting because the Raiders have already been a bad passing defense. But if you took note of what took place this week, there was a transaction with Garyon Conley, defensive secondary player from the Raiders, got traded to the Texans. He will now suit up this week for the Texans. They're obviously playing the Raiders. Look to know to understand how the Texans are going to exploit this defense just based on that information alone. I think this is a huge insight for the Texans, and I think that they're going to be able to really pick apart this defense.
All right. I like it. Chat says Randone is spitting fire, and I'm inclined to agree.
Trying to.
Yeah, I think you're all on point there. Great takeaway with the Conley news there. DeAndre Hopkins seems like pretty reasonably priced here as well. And the other guy that I'm probably going to get to a little bit anyways is Kenny Stills at $17. I feel like that's a pretty good bargain. He's got the big play upside. He's been a target when Will Fuller is out, and he should be close to 100% snap rate or something near that. All right. Cleveland Browns at the New England Patriots coming off a bye. New England favored by 12. I thought I saw 13.5 earlier today, but maybe that line has moved. 45.5 total. What are you liking here? What are you seeing? I kind of like the Browns as a bit of a contrarian play. Odell Beckham Jr. just $26. Maybe they can figure it out this week and catch some people, catch a little recency bias players by surprise, or am I just completely out to lunch here, Chris?
I think you're out to lunch and out to dinner because
be the first time.
This Patriots defense is absolutely one of the best defenses I've ever seen in my young career. I think the best defense I've seen since this has been the Ravens, man. Years and years ago. This defense is outstanding in so many ways. They put pressure on you. They really lock you down on man-to-man coverage. I think Gilmore is the best cornerback in the league. I think this week what we're going to see is this. I think we're going to see New England face a Browns team that is really lost in some areas, but they need to run. They need to run to be able to keep it close whatsoever. And I think that with this Patriots defense, I think it's going to be really tough for them to run. I also think it's going to be tough for them to pass. I think what we're going to see here is I think Sony Michel is in a great spot. We saw Chris Carson just recently torch the Browns defense. And for me, they struggle against the run in a lot of ways. If you want to date back a week before that to the 49ers, the multiple running backs ran all over them. So they can't stop the run. Sony Michel, he's getting his carries. He's getting his goal line carries as well. He's fairly priced. He's $20 on Yahoo. I think this is a great play. I don't think they're going to need to throw much. I think they're just going to run. I think they're going to, once again, just make it an easy game for Brady, an easy game management. But I also think that this is a great matchup for Julian Edelman. Browns struggle significantly against slot wide receivers. In PPR format, this is a great play. I think Edelman's going to have a lot of opportunity out of that slot. Once again, it's Brady's best connection, so you can't go wrong.
I'm thinking you're probably on point there. I do kind of like this as a contrarian stack, though. I still think that the price points are so low. Odell Beckham Jr. just $26 as well. Like the Patriots have played no one this year. The Dolphins, the Bills, the Giants, the Redskins, the Jets, the Steelers, the Jets again. Like it's just been. I'm sure their defense is elite, and I think you're right there. But at the same time, I would actually like to see them get tested. This might not be the week for it, but I'm holding them off on anointing them as the 85 Bears just yet until I actually see them play.
Hey, it's still the NFL. Like, no matter what they're doing is just unprecedented. It's like it doesn't exist from a defensive stand through this many games. So I think 7 games is more than enough of a sample size to justify how great they are. And I mean, Gilmore is just absolutely outstanding in the way that he is covering wideouts and the way that he reads quarterbacks. I mean, the way that he's reading routes and just putting wide receivers on lockdown is it's absolutely incredible.
Man, imagine if he was still on this Bills D, they'd be right up there too. All right, let's move on to the final game before we get out of here. Green Bay Packers at Matt Moore and the Kansas City Chiefs. I was just on the betting show. You can check that out with Jordan Frank and Ben Ross. We were talking about this line. I kind of like the Chiefs here. I like Andy Reid having 10 games to scheme this one up a little bit. And I kind of like Matt Moore's price point at $23 with all these weapons he's got at his disposal, as well as Sammy Watkins is back. We have Travis Kelce, who's really cheap at $22. I feel like this one could possibly shoot out. What are your general thoughts on this one? How are you approaching this game?
I think if you're going to want to roster someone from this game from the Chiefs side, I think you got to go with the running game. I mean, the Green Bay Packers, they don't know how to stop the run. They're just lost and confused when it comes to stuffing the run. And although the Chiefs don't have that identity with Pat Mahomes behind center, they should have that identity with Matt Moore. I think that will give them the best chance to win. I think McCoy and Damian Williams somehow just need to get as many carries as they can. I don't think Matt Moore is good. I'm sorry. I think, he came in and he had that touchdown pass to Tyreek Hill. But I think that this defense is a little bit different when it comes to just putting pressure on the quarterback. And I think that if they're able to put pressure on Matt Moore, it's going to make him very uncomfortable and very difficult to excel in that type of atmosphere. On the other side of the ball, man, I mean, you can't go wrong with pretty much anyone. I think this Chiefs defense is just really not that good. And what's difficult with the Chiefs is outside of the last game against the Broncos, they were one of the worst teams when it comes to quarterback pressure and also blitz pressure. And so if Aaron Rodgers is going to have time in the pocket, he's just going to eat you up alive. Even if he does have to scramble, that's not an issue. But if he has a comfortable pocket presence and he's calm in the pocket, look to Geronimo Allison, look to Jimmy Graham, look to Marquez Valdez-Scantling to create space and get open. And I think that this could be a big game for the Rodgers. I don't mind this Green Bay Packers team at all when it comes to any offensive weapon, especially the running game.
All right, great points there. Green Bay running game has been torched by opposing running backs so far this year. The only problem with going to the Chiefs is we just seen more. We thought Shady McCoy was going to take over these lead duties, and it's just looking like more and more of a timeshare. So it's kind of tough picking your back out of those three. But obviously, McCoy is probably going to be the best bet for a workhorse role. I'll just leave you with a few final awesome-o thoughts here. I feel like if he was here and we were building a lineup, one of the stacks we would be using is the Rams and the Cincinnati Bengals. He has Jared Goff as his only double A graded player in our rankings this week, as well Alex Erickson and Tyler Boyd. B for points, A for value. So if you are looking to game stack in GPPs, that's probably where Osmo will be overweight this week. That is going to do it for us here. Make sure to go over to Yahoo and check out what they've got on offer, especially their $1 Million Baller. Every single week they have a huge tournament. It's $10 to enter, and it's one of the best tournaments out there. So it's the first place I put my money every week. The management fees are lower. Alex and I will be back next week to break it all down, and we will see you then. Of course, we have lots of stuff coming up on Osmo.com, including the NBA is back as well. Jake Hari and I will be doing a live show at 4 o'clock Eastern, breaking down tonight's NHL slate, and we have all kinds of NBA content. So make sure to go check out all of our stuff on the Osmo YouTube page. That is going to do it. Chris, thanks for stepping up today and stepping in, and we will see you live tomorrow morning as well.
Yes. Me and Sal, 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time, going over our final thoughts for Week 8 for all platforms, specifically DraftKings and FanDuel. So if you can, check that out, and look forward to seeing you guys all in there.